welcome back to Vinyl Friday, where I go through my records like a big nerd and talk about why I love them. Today, we're going to be covering the first song of our White Album series, which means we finally get to take off the plastic. This do not open, factory sealed, for your protection. We'll show them. Here it is. A White Album. The Beatles. Ooh, it's embossed. The song we're going to be listening to today is one that I initially overlooked the first time I heard it. I'd have been about 14. I enjoyed it, but I sort of wrote it off as just a blues. It's only as I've gotten older that I've come to recognize the casual brilliance of the piece. Our album opener is Back in the USSR, and it sounds like this. What do we have here? We have a book! Whoa! It's a poster book. Oh. Alright, well, we're gonna set aside some time to look at that and enjoy it later. Wow. Didn't know there was a book. Wait, there's something on the other side, too. Oh, shit. That's cool. Yeah. Thanks for that, Beatles. Alright. This time. There's our apple. Oh, look how shiny. It's such a pity that they never recorded that one live as a band. Oh well, in an alternate universe maybe. This is the perfect way to open an album. To open such a big album, it's an arrival. I think the sound effects on records have come to be seen as kind of naff and boring, but I don't think this is so much naff as something which signals a beginning. It's not only a perfect album opener, it is also a very sincere homage to the band's musical ancestry. So we're going to break that down today and then have a look at what makes this song so incredibly delicious. If you'd like more of an introduction to like where the Beatles are at this moment and how we've arrived in 1968 and their history, we covered that last month and you can watch that here. I decided after doing the first episode of this series that it would be really fun to make a little lino cut print for each of the songs that we cover. So all of the songs on the White Album. What's that, like 30 individual little prints. Where have I put them? They look like this. So I've made a few of these, and I think I'll put some up on the Buy Me a Coffee page, but we can talk about that more later in the episode. For now, let's take this airplane touchdown less as a declarative statement and more of an imperative one. Let's begin. I would like to open this section with some words from Paul McCartney. Take it away, Storytime correspondent. Good evening, my people. We'll be taking today's first reading from Paul McCartney, The Lyrics. You can't actually see the title, so you'll just have to take my word for it. Paul here is speaking of the Beach Boys. They'd already produced some great stuff, some innovative work that had itself come out of the doo-wop tradition. And we'd already nicked a few of those little things. Of course, they were nicking from us. Everybody was nicking from everybody else. There was a circularity to the whole enterprise. I mentioned in the beginning that this song has ties to the band's past, and in order to demonstrate that, we're going to have to build a timeline, and it will lead us to August of 1968, when the Beatles sat down and laid Back in the USSR to tape. Our timeline begins 10 years earlier, in 1958. A man named Chuck Berry, rock and roll pioneer, releases a song entitled Sweet Little 16.
All the cats wanna dance with Sweet Little 16.
It's kind of a gross title, especially when you consider that Chuck was in his early 30s at the time, and it gets worse, but we'll get to that, because that's not important at this point in the story. What's important, the single lands in Liverpool, and it is heard and loved by teens all over town. But it represents a paradigm shift for two teens in particular, John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Our second reading comes from The Good Book. This is John Lennon speaking. He says, I still love Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis. They're like primitive painters. Chuck Berry is one of the all-time great poets, a rock poet, you could call him. We all owe a lot to him, including Dylan. When I hear rock, good rock, of the caliber of Chuck Berry, I just fall apart and I have no other interest in life. The world could be ending if rock and roll is playing. When Chuck Berry died, Paul McCartney said, From the first minute we heard the great guitar intro to Sweet Little 16, we became fans of Chuck Berry. To us, he was a magician making music that was exotic yet normal at the same time. We learned so many things from him, which led us to a dream world of rock and roll music. And the song features a very distinctive strumming pattern, which our guitar correspondent will demonstrate for us now. So simply, this is the pattern here. And he used it for quite a lot of his songs, like, deep down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the evergreens. I think it's a bit faster than that, but, you know, you get the idea. That's the pattern. It's now 1959, and Chuck Berry releases a song entitled Back in the USA. The song details the singer flying in from overseas and expressing his relief at being back home where the girls are the best girls, and as much as girls can be the best or the worst, because we're not a monolith. But anyway, the song opens on the line, oh well, I feel so good today.
We just touched ground on an international runway.
In the lyrics, he also lists a bunch of American cities along the way in his journey home.
Detroit, Chicago, Chattanooga, Baton Rouge.
And it closes on, I'm so glad I'm living in the USA. Jumping ahead now to 1962, where Chuck Berry is imprisoned for transferring a 14-year-old girl across state lines, which is yuck. Massive yuck. Meanwhile, in 1963, while he's away in prison, John Lennon and Paul McCartney, who by this point have formed this little group, they're fine, I guess, record a cover of Roll Over Beethoven by Chuck Berry, which they put on their second album with the Beatles. What's more, furthermore, in addition, another pop group named the Beach Boys have taken Sweet Little 16 and interpolated it, changed the lyrics around and released it as Surfin' USA.
Sweet little 16, she just got to have.
Now, normally I'm a little bit wary of music by black artists only achieving mainstream success after they've been disseminated by white artists.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog. Snooping around the door. Well, you ain't never gonna rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine.
But in the case of Sweet Little 16, I think it is probably for the best that the lyrics were changed. So thank you, Beach Boys. Thank you, Brian Wilson and Mike Love. They will show up later in this story. They're important. Remember them. Remember them. The song's new lyrics list places in California.
You'll catch them surfing outside, Ventura County line.
Except for one line, which lists a place in Australia.
Australia's Caribbean side.
In 1965, the Beach Boys released a song called California Girls.
I wish they all could be California girls.
And in this track, our singer has been all around the world and he's seen all kinds of girls, but he can't wait to get back to the United States where they have the cutest girls in the world. You guessed it. You didn't guess it. Everyone knows this song. Another one of those. This is relevant. This also is the kicking off point of a friendly rivalry between the Beach Boys songwriter Brian Wilson and Paul McCartney, where each is taking inspiration from the work of the other, until about 1967 when the Beatles release Poor beleaguered Brian Wilson suffers a massive mental health crisis for ages. So that was the end of that. Finally, it is spring of 1968. The Beatles are on their spiritual retreat in Rishikesh. And also in Rishikesh is the Beach Boys' Mike Love. The Beatles record a spoof Beach Boys style birthday song for Mike while they're in Rishikesh entitled Spiritual Regeneration. And I think this song is not only a demonstration of the innate songwriting skills of the Beatles, of John Lennon and Paul McCartney, because the song is a better Beach Boys song than many of the songs that the Beach Boys actually released, but also it demonstrates that the Beach Boys were almost certainly on Paul McCartney's mind when, at about this point in time, he sits down to write Back in the USSR.
I'm back in the USSR.
And in August of 1968, they go into the studio, they record the song. There we go. That's our timeline. Now, why is any of this relevant? Well, let me tell you. Back in the USSR is packed with Beach Boys references, but particularly in the middle 8. Let's have a listen to that. So from the top, we've got our trademark Beach Boys falsetto vocals, and they're coupled with this dum 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 dum, which is out of my range, obviously, clearly. In any case, that backing vocal is lifted almost wholesale from Help Me Rhonda. Lyrically, it also follows the themes of California Girls, in that it lists girls from different places and concludes that the best girls are the girls from home.
Southern girls with the way they talk, leave the West behind.
Another point of relevance is that Chuck Berry wrote these foundational rock and roll songs about basically the same thing, about wanting to come home or yearning for home, and listing all of these place names.
We just touched ground on an international runway. Man, I had a dreadful flight.
And that figures not only into this middle 8 section, but also in the title, Back in the USA, Back in the USSR.
You can bet your life I did till I got back in the USA. Back in the USSR.
And of course the song borrows from Chuck Berry that very distinctive guitar strumming style that was demonstrated for us earlier. This is the pattern. Also, we're not doing 1964 Bob Dylan despite the getup. I just didn't want to look too much like the anchor, you know, so I put on a hat. Anyway, flew in from Miami Beach, BOAC, didn't get to bed last night. So yeah, there's that pattern again. You can hear it in the verse most obviously.
Didn't get to bed last night.
The Beatles, the Beach Boys, what have you, all roads lead back to John Lennon and Paul McCartney as teenagers having the world changed by early rock and roll. Oh, and I highlighted Chuck Berry's Prison Time, not for musical reasons necessarily, but rather as a cautionary tale about the complicated nature of the relationship between a listener and their very human artist. And also, like, don't transfer minors across state lines. Anyway, let's talk about the lyrics of the song. Let's move our sewing stuff out of the frame and then talk about the lyrics of the song. The lyrics are a big part of the magic of this song. There are so many hilarious one-liners. Let's find some. Of course, referencing Ray Charles and Georgia on My Mind.
Keeps Georgia on my mind.
Except, obviously not the state, but the country. Quite clever, Paul McCartney. There's also this line that I love. As if a balalaika is not strictly a traditional folk instrument, but rather a rock and roll instrument. Let me hear your balalaikas ringing out. Play it loud, play it proud. And in case you're wondering, this is what a balalaika looks like. This is Paul's balalaika specifically. That line actually inspired the design of this linocut print. Let me hear your balalaikas ringing out. And there is some like cheeky lines that I didn't even notice. Hello again. Must be almost bedtime. This is Paul speaking. The line, "Show me round your snow-peaked mountains way down south," has a bit of a naughty schoolboy tinge, not to mention "come and keep your comrade warm." That's all. Good night. It's also funny on a broader scale in that it's glorifying this place that is, as far as possible, not necessarily geographically, but it's that too, from the idyllic, sun-kissed beaches of California in 1968. Beautiful, simple little satirical piece. And I don't know that it could have been pulled off by an American, because they were still firmly embroiled in the Cold War in 1968, whereas British people had enough of a distance from it that they could really exploit the humor of the situation. And that's, you know, to great musical effect on this track. I'd like to dig a little deeper into the music now. As I mentioned earlier, I wrote this song off because it just felt like a regular blues song. But it doesn't take too much of a close listen to realize that it does have some of the hallmarks of blues music, but it very early on steps off that very well-trod path. Trodden path? Well-trodden path. Well, It steps off that path that has been... Never mind. Piano correspondent? Hey friends, long time no see. I have to apologize, I'm a little embarrassed. I came in today in the same outfit as the anchor, so you'll have to forgive the lack of creativity on the clothing front, but show must go on. Typically, a blues will follow this chord pattern. So if the song were to follow that pattern, it would go, "Flew from Miami Beach, BOAC, didn't get to bed last night. On the way, the paper bag was on my knee. Man, I had the dreadful flight." And then it would go. In this case, the song kind of starts that way. We start with a 7th in the chord. That's this one here, which gives it that bluesy feel. Flew from Miami Beach, BOAC. So, you know, we're on track. It's a blues. But then we go, "Didn't get to bed last night." So that becomes... And then at the chorus, it does the same thing. That there, though, the end. That's typically blues. It's early rock and roll, which of course has its roots in blues. And then at the end, we've got, "The Ukraine girls really knocked me out. They leave the West behind." Bluesy. But then the bass descends on the next section. "Scout girls make me sing and shout. And George is always on my mind. So we end back with our blues conventions, but in the middle, he's shaking things up, so it's really original. What's really lovely also about that chromatic descent is it goes... And from here, we're perfectly positioned to go back to this chord. They match, they fit, they're in the same family. And that takes us very neatly back into our blues. Paul McCartney was always very good at this. He was very good at tying up his loose ends, taking us off the beaten path. Beaten path. It's not that hard. Beaten path. But not necessarily so far that we can't find our way back. Very clever. Solid work. I love that the piano on this track is played in the style of like Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard. It's got that very boisterous, percussive quality to it. So again, we're nodding to our early rock and roll influences on this track. Oh, and by that I mean they're beating the shit out of it. Boy, this song really does thunder along, doesn't it? Just so much muscle is going into that. And then there's this glissando. Piano correspondent, can you demonstrate what a glissando is, please? A glissando? It took 7 years of piano lessons for that. Thank you very much. Right before the last verse. Yeah, I love that. Nice little accent, which again is very Jerry Lee Lewis. There's also so much crazy tom work happening in the drums, and they were potentially not actually played by Ringo for reasons we'll get into shortly, but many of the fills on this track are actually played on the toms, not on snare or cymbals or what have you. And I could just tell you about it, but because our construction correspondent has built a kit for the channel, now we have more problems than we began with. I can now introduce you to our drum correspondent. Hello everyone, I'm the drum correspondent. I ran into the anchor the other day. She said to me, "Do you want to join the channel?" I was like, "Yeah, of course I want to join the channel. What do you want me to do?" And she said, "We've just gotten this new drum kit and we need a drummer. Do you want to play drums?" And I said, "Sure. I don't play drums. Is that a problem?" And she said to me, "Can you do this?" I said, "Yeah, I can." She said, "Great, you'll figure it out." So here we are. I'm going to ask that you go easy on me. I've been playing these for exactly 4 days. And by these, I don't just mean this kit, I mean any drum kit. Also, I didn't get the memo about the uniform. Oh well, here goes nothing. So, from the beginning of the song, the toms are front and center. From what I can tell, The song opens like this. I think. Something like that. In any case, the toms are really prominent. From that point, they just keep bringing them back in. Like, somewhere in the first verse, I think it is, there's a fill that goes approximately like this. Do I at least look like a drummer? That's what drummers look like, right? I feel so cool. Just know that. I mean, the chorus has some fills that are snares. Like the end of the chorus, it goes, "You don't know how lucky you are, boys." Apart from that, all the fun not supposed to swear. All the fun stuff is happening right here. Yeah, I can probably do this. Just hit things really hard. Yeah, I can figure this out. Oh, while I've got the camera and the mic, in the stuttering part, in the back, in the US, they're doing this really cool thing with the hi-hat, which I noticed when I was listening in preparation for the episode, because, you know, I do my homework. They're just doing like a... That's harder than it looks. Back in the US, back in the US, back in the USSR. Maybe I should practice that for a bit. Anyway, that's what they're doing. Just really rapid hi-hat. I don't know what that's called. I have none of the language, but the hi-hat is ing. So yeah, this is a fantastic song. As I said before, it's a thunderous, rollicking number. And you've got to remember that the Beatles hadn't actually released anything in months, like almost a year. Magical Mystery Tour came out at the end of 1967, but it was only an EP. This is released at the end of 1968, so Beatle fans have been waiting for basically a year for a new album to come out. And not only do they get two for the price of one, actually it was probably priced for the price of two, it opens like this. This is like a, we're back! And so I've left this bit until the end because I didn't want the tense circumstances of the studio to mar the very ebullient, just frothing, energetic nature of this song. But this is the track that Ringo walked out on. Like, he left the Beatles briefly while they were recording this track.
I felt two things. I felt I wasn't playing great, and the other three were really happy, and I was an outsider. Came to this decision, I'm leaving.
The others would often show up hours later than him, so he'd just be sitting in the reception waiting for them to show. So a lot of sitting around. Then while they were recording, he was playing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And the others were as well, but he had less of a creative stake in what was happening. It wasn't his songs. So where Paul might have had a vested interest in making sure that his idea was being realized exactly, Ringo was kind of just doing as he was told. And not only was he doing as he was told, he was being nitpicked by Paul McCartney besides. And so while they were recording this, he stormed off in a temper, which is uncharacteristic of Ringo. He was usually the sort of mediator, peacekeeper character. But no, he was super pissed at Paul.
You go through life, you never stop and say, you know what, I think you were great. Well, I don't think we'd ever done any of that with Ringo. It'd always just been, yeah, he's great, he's good. And he felt insecure, so we had to, and he left. So we had to kind of go and sort of say, no, you're great, man, you're the best. And then he said, oh, thank you. I think he was pleased to hear that.
Hopefully Paul, to some extent, realized the error of his ways. I would like to think so, but at the same time, Paul ended up playing, and don't know how much of this made it to the final mix, but Paul ended up playing the drums, the bass, lead guitar, backing vocals, lead vocal on this track. And I wonder if maybe this was the point where he went, oh, actually, I can do any of these things, and the others aren't doing them the way that I would do them, which was a big contributing factor in what ultimately broke up the band. But this story has a happy ending, discounting the breakup, the eventual breakup of the Beatles. And that is that the others pleaded with Ringo to return, and when he did, George and Mal Evans had decorated Ringo's kit with flowers.
It's just flowers everywhere, and John had sent me telegrams saying, "You're the best rock drummer, come on home." And I just felt good about myself again, and we'd got through that little crisis, and it was great. And then the White Album really took off.
And that seems like a nice place to finish this episode. And before we close out, I'm making these because I like collecting things, and I'm very excited at the end to have like a stack of 30 of these. They're quite hefty. And I was originally going to do them as larger prints, but I thought maybe, I hope this isn't presumptuous, I thought maybe some of you might like some as well. And the cost of postage to especially the United States is offensive. It's just rude. And I felt like I could price these a lot more fairly if I put them up on the Buy Me a Coffee page as postcards. So if you want me to post you a postcard about back in the USSR, you can do so, I think, from about now on the Buy Me a Coffee page. No pressure. And, you know, as per usual, if you enjoyed this episode or you would like to support any of the weird things I do, I'll leave a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page at the bottom in the description part, which is just below where I'm sitting currently. Not in my living room, but virtually. But no pressure, friends. And thank you so much to everybody who has made a donation or signed up as a member. I really appreciate you sponsoring today's episode, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you're interested in what any of my original music sounds like, I will leave a link in the description to that as well. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you here next week. Have a great weekend! Another pop group entitled The Beach Boys. All of the girls from all over the country, all over the place. Wait, is it international? No, California girls. Midwest, blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, he does talk about all the world. Some innovative work that had itself come out of the doo-wop. That very distinctive strumming style that the government? The guitar correspondent.
Back in the USSR.
No, that's not it either. Jerry Lee Lewis. Back. Wow. It takes a lot of focus.
Back in the USSR.